My name is Margie Clay. I'm an instructor at Department of Developmental Communications and College Success. And I teach college success and foundations of student development. And
I'm Maggie Soff. I'm the reading specialist in the Learning Commons, and I taught ENC 1101 and reading 17 in the past.
And today we're talking about textbook analysis. And I put our objectives up here on the board just to give you an idea of what we're going to be going over in the next 55 minutes. We're going to first look at how we think through what we think of when we go through our textbooks, when we look at a textbook as a good reader versus what students do when they go through them. And then Maggie's going to show you a lot of the things that she does in her workshop on textbook analysis, and show you some things that you can do, that she can do for you, and also that you can do things that are you can adapt specifically for your class if you want to do something yourself. And the survey that you have there, I'd like you to, we'll start off by taking a look at that, because what I think that many instructors that I've talked to have talked about, the big thing is they're frustrated because they give reading assignments and then the students don't read it, or they've read it but they obviously did not pick out the key points. So we ask them a question and we get the blank stare. And what do we do about that? So I wanted us to take a look at, well, what do we do as good readers versus what do they do? Hence the survey there. So if you would take a look at the questions that you answered, how many people, count up how many things you answered yes to, that you do. How many people had more than 18 that they answered yes to? 1. How about more than 15 that they answered yes to? 2. More than 10 that she answered yes to? All right, so 10 or more, raise your hands if you said yes to at least 10 of those 20 questions, just so I see. Okay, so it's just about everybody had at least half of those strategies that you use when you are reading a textbook or any other type of informational material. Now, take a look again at those questions. Just take a minute and look at them and put a little tick mark by the things that you think, we don't know for sure, the strategies that you think your students might be using. None?
I see head shaking.
You know, you might, as you read through, you might have thought of 1 or 2. Oh, well, yeah, I talked to them about that. We teach that, whatever. So perhaps they are thinking about that. I know College Success, we talk a lot about SQ3R. So some of the things in there refer to activities, strategies that are part of that SQ3R. So how many did you tick off? Leslie, how many did you tick off?
I've only done 1 right now.
1?
Well, one of them, yeah, I haven't had a chance to go through all of them, but okay. The one that I would think that a lot of my students, or some of the students, let me say, what some of the students would do would be, if a passage is particularly difficult, I may even read it out loud. I think that they might do that, especially if they're not necessarily in the classroom, but they're home working on it, and they would probably feel freer to read it out loud.
Okay.
As opposed to being in the classroom. I think they would do that. That was one of them I was looking at.
Okay.
I'm going to look at some more here.
Anybody else? Annie?
I would just say probably number 4, I adapt my reading rate to the text level of difficulty. Speeding up when it seems easy and slowing down when it seems hard.
So they probably do that. Okay. Anybody else? Greg, what'd you put?
I think if the coursework is really important to their future goals,
Pardon me?
I think if the coursework is really important to their future goals, they will form study groups to talk about difficult concepts. I think we see that often in learning commons.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting one. I hadn't really thought about that. Anybody else have one they'd like to share? That you think the students do?
I think what Christine was just saying about what Greg just said was that, especially the allied health majors, you notice a lot of them form those study groups.
They're in their cohort.
They're kind of
Okay.
that cohort anyway,
Yeah.
and then so they,
I don't
but
know.
I do have in my 07, which is the first level of reading, this semester, I have a group of young ladies that are returning adult students, and they have bonded, and they have studied. They came on Saturday, and I heard them saying today after class, well, we can try to get a room reserved over in the Learning Commons.
Wow.
I know that. Yeah, this is. I was like, oh, Jesus.
That's great.
If I work here long enough, I don't see a whole lot.
Yeah.
But this is my 07, and you don't hear them say that very often. But they're very weak class as a whole, but very hard working. So I'm able to really, I always have their attention, and it takes them a while to understand things. So, but they are really trying. That was the group that was in this morning, in the lab.
Okay, everyone here I see we've got Learning Commons people and 1510 or developmental reading. And I'm sorry, I don't know your name. Can you tell us? Laverne, and what do you teach?
I don't teach, I work in the Learning Commons.
Oh, so you're another Learning Commons person. Okay, Laverne, can we get her a thing so she can put her name on it? Oh, thanks. Okay, so
What's your name? Do we have markers?
yes, there's
Okay.
some.
Oh, I didn't realize these were all left here, but.
Okay, so there are a few things that we see that they're doing. There aren't nearly as many as you do, that you've marked off that you do, though. And the other thing I would like you to look at in terms of these questions is take a look through there, and you will note that some of the strategies that are listed here are ones that are more particularly involving higher level critical thinking skills. And I think question 10, 10, 13, and 20 are 3 of them that I marked. Whenever I can, I try to take the author's words personally, considering that I may already know about what I may already know about the subject, and checking to see if I agree or disagree with the author's point. I look for patterns of organization, like cause and effect, comparison, contrast. Now, we discussed that in reading and developmental reading classes, but how many of them actually do this when they're reading their textbook is another question, because that will help me mentally organize the information in the text. And the other one I had ticked was 20. It's over on the other page here for me. If I don't understand a key point in the chapter, I clarify it with a classmate or an instructor before I go on to the next chapter. These kinds of things, higher level critical thinking skills, are ones that we don't see our students using when they're reading their textbooks. Now, our textbooks, and since we're all sort of, none of us are in the other, teaching the other subjects that are not sort of, or working with not developmental aspects of reading or language in general, our textbooks tend to be at a lower reading level. But still, they have problems. So imagine what the frustrations are of the professors that are dealing with textbooks, and you who work at the Learning Commons know very well, because those are the books that your students are bringing you. What I want us to think about today is that these are the things that we do. We do them without thinking. We do them without thinking. We pick up the book, we flip through and see what's in it because we're curious. We're interested in seeing what's it all about. We know why we're reading before we start to read. We do that without thinking. So how do we get our students to learn those same behaviors? They don't know them. Perhaps we came from families where that was modeled for us. It could be that there could be a myriad of reasons why these are strategies that we developed, but there are many reasons why our students, and particularly the demographic that we have here, do not develop those things. One way that we can help them to do that is to share with them our thought process. That's different from telling them, talking about comparison and contrast or patterns of organization, and okay, find it in this paragraph or whatever. Sharing with them how we think as we go through something is different. And it helps them see that there is another way that people think, and that this is a successful college, a person who successfully completed college who thinks this way. And one of the things I always tell my students is, you're here to, in my college success class, to think, how do I need to change the way I think in order to be successful? So in college, in my college classes. So one of the ways that they need to change the way they think is they need to see how someone else thinks. So what I mean by that is taking your book and saying, for instance, when on my first day of class, I pick up my textbook and I say, what do you guys do with your textbook after you buy it? Or what do you do when you go into the bookstore? And most of them say, well, I look, I've got to get this book, I get it, I pay for it, I throw it in the trunk of my car, I put it on my bookshelf, and if I'm lucky, they brought it to class that day. Very few of them look at the book beforehand. And I said, well, let me tell you what I do. And I go through and I talk about, when I walk into the bookstore, I look at the book. I look through it. I look for pictures. I look for this and that. Because I'm trying to decide, is this a class that I really want to take? If I'm going to have to read this, am I capable? Or is this professor's, the book that he's using, that looks more like my learning style. Maybe I need to change to a different professor. Not so true here at TCC. I think we tend to use the same books, but in university, that can be very true. So I will go through and I will talk to them about all my thought processes before I even decide whether that's the class for me or walk into that classroom on the first day of class. And I see that makes a difference for them. I see in people's eyes that they've never thought that. So when we give assignments to read something, it can be helpful to talk about and think about, how do I do this? And share that with them, how you do it. That can help them to see how. It gives them a model to work on. And it's something that we need to do throughout the semester. So that's something that I do with my books. And does anybody have like an example that they might give of something they do that's similar? Or, ma'am, yes, Sharon.
When I taught humanities, what I did is I brought my book in, and I encouraged the students to bring their book on the first day of class. And I told them, for the first 30 minutes, I just want you to get in groups and look through the book and get a feeling of the different chapters and the pictures and the topics. because we will be using the book in class. And I was very consistent with that, and eventually they realized that the book didn't bite, but they were so intimidated at first because the book was so big, it had so many topics, so many chapters, and they really felt overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And I thought, if I want them to read chapters, I need them to desensitize them to the book.
Yeah.
And then as I was going through the book and I would scaffold them, I would go around the room and kind of say, okay, what do you find interesting? What did you like in that section? What about this picture? What do you think interests you in these topics? And then they got really involved in this. And I did that throughout the whole semester.
That's a good point, that we need to continue to do it throughout the whole semester, and it's a great lead into all the things that Maggie has to tell us about ways to use that textbook at the beginning and throughout the semester. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Maggie.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Okay, I want to know, I know almost everybody except Olga, you look familiar to me. Have I met you before?
Maybe,
I think so too. What do you teach?
1101.
I think I did meet you. Yes. Everybody's going to have a textbook features analysis form. What do you teach, Annie?
College success.
College success. All right. Greg, what do you teach?
You don't know me.
I know you. Okay. What I'm going to do now is give you a demonstration of what I do when I take workshops into the classroom. I have taken workshops into history students, college success. I work with Patrick McDermott very closely, with some of the history teachers. And I wanted to ask you what you teach, because I'm going to give you a book, and it almost doesn't matter right now. So I'm just going to give you, you're going to get a psychology book.
Oh, what is a psychology book?
Psychology book. Great. You can go to nursing school. Let's see. Christine, you're good. You signed up for physiology and anatomy and physiology. Let's see. Annie, you signed up for history.
Ooh.
And let me see, Mike, you signed up for government.
All right, thank you.
And let's see, Laverne, you decided you want to become a paramedic. Let's see, who else do we have here? These are a little bit lighter, so I can carry them a little bit better. Okay, so Mike, I gave you a book. Jerry has a book. Olga, let's see. What did you say you teach?
1101.
1101. Okay, so today you decided you were going to sign up for this history class.
Okay.
And Leslie, you decided that you really wanted to take political science.
I'm about full of politics right now. The state of Florida.
Have you had that book? Okay, you can bring those down. Okay, so we're going to look at my workshop that I call Textbook Features Analysis. That's this form that you have, and it is part of SQ3R. Have you all heard of SQ3R? In Student Success you have. Have you heard of SQ3R? It's a reading strategy that is called survey, question, read, recite, and review. And the intent is you survey the textbook, look to see what's in it, turn headings into questions, and then when you're finished reading, you're going to recite things out loud, review the material before you go to class. But it is my personal belief that the most important part of this SQ3R process is the survey part. Because if you don't understand how your textbook is organized, when somebody gets a book like this, and Jerry said it absolutely perfectly, what happens to your brain when you see a book like this and it's a scary, scary class, and what happens to your brain? It shuts down. And I have talked to students who say they'll get a book like that, they close it, they never open it again, and that is no way to take a class. You will never pass a class like that. So I encourage every instructor to become familiar with their textbook and share it with their students, because There's no way that I can physically see every student on campus, and your captive audience is the best audience. If you send them to me, they may come, but they may not come. They probably won't come because they're told to. So if you take a few minutes at the beginning of the semester to go through the book with them, like we're going to do right now, I think that you will find they maybe will read it and respond better. Okay, so we're going to look and see what this process does for them. Okay, so look at your book and open it, and we start with the table of contents. And when you are doing this for real, this is a sample that I'm going to flash on the screen of a political science course that I do. So I always tell them to look at the, look at the cover and see what the cover is like. What's the title? Do I have the right book? And then we're going to look at all of these pieces on the front page of this textbook features analysis. And the hard thing about doing this as an activity in class is that you want them to look at the table of contents, fill in some information over here. What does that do for you? Answer the questions that are on here. But in reality, when you survey a textbook, the whole process is just a few minutes, and you do all of these things simultaneously. You are looking at color, you're looking at the type styles, you're looking at all of the things, photographs, charts, graphs, all of that stuff. So in your textbook, you have now signed up for whatever class I gave you. So turn to the table of contents. And let your eyes roam down the table of contents and ask yourself, while your eyes are roaming, what do I know about these topics? A lot of times students will sign up for classes because they have to take so many hours of whatever class. And they'll sign up for a class not really knowing what it is. And then they get into it and they're like, whoa, this is way more than I thought it was going to be. So have them look at the table of contents and just let their brain start processing the topics that are in there. I usually ask myself, what do I know about this topic? I don't know much about this topic. In your book, I also point them to the areas in the preface. And this is something that most students don't do, and it's not on this form. But the preface, if your book has a preface, there's information in there for the student. And a lot of times it's about the websites that are available or other things. In this particular book on politics, it told me what this course was going to be all about and what I was going to learn about. So if I'm a student going into nursing or I'm going into anatomy and physiology, and I never had anatomy and physiology in high school, I want to look at that piece in the front that's going to tell me what I'm going to be experiencing in that book. But I guarantee you that probably 99.9% of the students don't even look at the preface. But it has information that will start preloading their brain with information that they may not have come with, or that they have but they don't know that they have. So we are trying to build prior knowledge in students that may not know that they have prior knowledge, because it is when they're reading the book itself, if they draw on their prior knowledge, they get a lot more out of it. If you can connect to something that you know, you will learn and remember better. So in your textbook, do you have a preface? Is there anything in there about something that would help you learn that class? In the sometimes there's information to the instructor. Well, I'm the student, I don't care about that page. So I go on by anything about the instructor. But this particular class that I did, I happened to notice that there was some more information about politics, and it caught my eye because the color of this heading was so eye-catching to me, and the question itself that I turn it into, who gets what in American politics, was very interesting to me, because it's always in the news. It's never not in the news. So, I wanted to read a little bit more. So as a student coming into a political science class, I could say, well, here's a little bit more. I can feed my brain a little bit more knowledge before I start looking at mine. So in your textbook, Okay, so we come out and get to the first chapter of your textbook. And another thing that I do, I'll take this pop culture zone one because this is pretty, just lay this down by you, is before I even start looking at my book, I set it up with tabs and I tab all of the chapters that I'm going to use in the class. I tab the glossary and the index in the back so that when I do start reading, everything is like this, and I teach that to every student. And I have instructors telling me that they see their students with tabs all over the place. And I'm like, oh good for you. So when I have a class that I'm going to say that maybe this science book is going to blow me away and I'm afraid of it, I say we're going to look at the chapters in the book. Go to any chapter in the book, find the beginning of that chapter and the end of that chapter. I usually take chapter 1 just because it's the first one. Okay, so I find a chapter and then I find the end of that chapter. Now in your book, find a chapter and the end, beginning and end of one chapter. Put your fingers there so that you can see how fat it is. Okay, and now look at that compared to the rest of the book. And you are now the student in that class. This relaxes your brain. Your brain can say, I can handle that. I can handle that. It is simply a psychological trick. It just lets your brain relax. And so they won't just close the book and not read it anymore. Okay. So isn't that crazy? But that is what happens with the brain. So if your brain gets locked because the book is too stinking big, take one chapter, that's what it is, and then look at, okay, now we're going to look at that chapter. So hold your hands on your chapter, put a little marker at the beginning or the end or something, so because you're going to just work with that chapter and we're going to look at the rest of the features on the yellow form. So in that chapter, go through your book and look for all of these things. What are the images and graphics that you see in your book? What are the sidebars or pull-out boxes and that you see in your book? Does your history book have color? Does it have a different typography? And I always tell students that's just a fancy schmancy word for different type styles or fonts. They relate to fonts these days. So it's just type style. And then I ask them, look at the organization. When you look at your book, does it start with some focus questions? Does it have learning objectives? Does it have anything like that? And at the end, does it have chapter review or a summary or chapter review questions, or what does it have at the end of that chapter? Okay? Look and see how it's organized. Also notice where the navigation parts are, the headers and footers. And I've actually met students who don't know what headers and footers are. So I say, well, so it's where the page numbers and stuff are located, and it tells you, what does it tell you? So, and in the activity in the class, I have them write down what they're seeing in their textbook when we do this as a workshop. So look at yours and see what your textbook has. And then make a note of it in your little form, in the right column. How you doing? You want to talk about what you're finding? A lot of things. What are you finding there?
So many things.
Which book do you have? Oh, you signed up for paramedic school. Okay, good.
I'm in over my head.
She's in over her head. So the table of contents, when you scan down the table of contents and kind of let yourself ask what you know about that class, how much did you know about that class?
Not a whole lot.
Not a whole lot.
Well, I took diplomacy, so I know a little bit of this.
Okay.
A little bit of this history.
Okay. All right. did you know about nursing, Greg?
Just what I've experienced personally in my interactions with nurses, taking care of my mom.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, and that's really what people think. They don't know anything about the class, but suddenly when you let your eyes examine the topics, things start popping back into your brain and you'll make connections. Oh my gosh, yes, this was what it was like taking care of my mom. I understand that. So you don't come in a blank slate. You have usually some kind of connection.
Well, you know what, I had more of a connection when I started going into the chapter, and then, you know, and reading the pictures and the graphs and that. It's like, oh, okay, that, you know, but when I saw this, I'm like, no, I don't remember this. You know, I mean, you know, I kind of, but not to the extent of the Cold War and contaminated in the East Asia. You know that,
Sure.
It didn't ring a bell.
Who does? You know, who goes around with all of that stuff in their pocket at any moment that you can just take it out and revisit it? Because life has moved on and you've done 100 million other things since then. So how do you do that? But when students start visiting the topics, everybody had history in high school.
Yeah.
They had to because it's required by the state that they take it. So it's like they have some knowledge, they just don't really know that they have that knowledge. And by visiting the topics in the table of contents, that starts to jog those brain cells and those memories and oh yeah, you know, I remember Mr. Grady we talked about the Cold War and that, so yeah. So what about you, Mike? Did you find anything that you were familiar with in your, what class are you taking?
I was in politics.
He's in politics?
History.
Okay.
Well, I've taken quite a few courses in this. I just
Okay.
kind of brought back fond
Okay,
memories.
all right. I should have given you a different class.
Maybe Laverne's class.
Laverne's class.
I want this.
Okay. And what about you, Jerry? What class did you enroll in?
I enrolled in psychology.
Psychology.
Which is such a broad topic.
Yes.
And so I thought, well, I kind of read over the headers to kind of find out what looks familiar to me and what doesn't. And so then I realized they've moved on quite a bit since the last time I took psychology.
Yeah. Okay. So when you look through your book and you notice what kind of pictures they had in it, what kinds of pictures were in your books?
Mine was black and white.
Black and white. No color in that book at all, right?
That's boring.
Anybody else have color?
color, cartoons.
Color, cartoons.
I got cartoons, but,
Okay.
I had a lot of maps.
yeah.
You got a lot of maps.
Yes.
What class are you in? You're taking
History.
history. You're going to have a lot of maps in history.
Yes.
Yeah.
But you know, it's really interesting when you start kind of reading through it, and it's like, this is, you know, it's stuff that, you know, that kind of jump out at you.
Right. There are things that jump out at you. Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Does your textbook have little sidebars and pull-out boxes, anything along the margins that help you understand the concept as you approach it?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
They provide particular examples, specific
Yes.
examples.
Like this.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
Yours is colorful.
Lots
Yeah.
of pretty colors.
Okay. So when you look at those little sidebars that you have, what kind of information is in those? How does that help you as the reader, the student reader?
It summarizes the topic in many cases, or maybe goes into a little more detail on a concept. But it's bulleted, it's easy, it's accessible. I can remember this information.
Right.
It's not buried,
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
pulled out
Yeah.
for me.
Sometimes in the margins of their books, there'll be little checkpoints, or embedded into the text, there'll be little checkpoints, but usually they're out on the sides where stop here and look, there'll be a little checkpoint. And the purpose of those, what would it be? To stop and check your understanding. And most students whiz right on by those, and I say, if your book has little checkpoints, stop and check yourself there. because if you keep cramming more and more into your head without grasping what's in front there, you're not going to be able to remember it all. But the publishers today know a lot more about brain science and how people learn and remember, that they put these little places in there particularly so the teachers don't have to stop and say, okay, now what do you remember now, you know, or leave it up to the student, because they're training without coming out and saying, I'm teaching you how to read this book. They're teaching you how to read this book. Stop at the checkpoints, review what you have. From one checkpoint to the next checkpoint is one topic usually. So at that checkpoint, I only have to go back to the checkpoint before. So they're chunking information into more manageable pieces, which is how we learn best. So, okay, what about typography? That's the fancy schmancy word for type styles. How does that help students?
Well, you would think that the bold print would alert a student to pay more attention to it.
Yes, it emphasizes something. Italic, bold, okay. And color, what about color? What about that black and white book? I put that book in these workshops intentionally because it is a current textbook.
But they do have some cartoon lights, so that kind of draws me a little bit. But I like the color. Looking at it, it's just.
Why did you like that color?
Because it's more inviting and it's more intriguing, you know.
So it attracts you to it. I'm going to read that because it's just plain more interesting than that shades of gray stuff, right? Okay. So when you looked at the beginning and ends of your chapters, did your chapters have focus questions?
Yes.
Learning objectives? Did it have review stuff? Any review questions or summary, conclusion, chapter questions in hindsight? None of that? Some of them do, some of them don't.
I think this one has more critical thinking checkpoints throughout the chapter
Yes,
to help you summarize as you go.
yes, yes. So, okay. And your navigation points are headers and footers. You're the student who just asked me, I don't know what headers and footers are. What are headers and footers and why are they important? Laverne.
Footers kind of, you know, within the text is like refer to this, and sometimes it further explains a concept that you may not be familiar with.
Okay, sorry. Anybody else? What are headers and footers and how do they help you? Headers are just things at the top of the page. There are things like, do they have headers in this book? Sometimes they don't. This book does not have headers, but it has footers. It has things at the bottom, at the foot. Think of your book as a bed, and it has things at the head of the bed or at the top, and at the foot of the bed or on the bottom, you know, your feet down there. So what's in the footers is usually page numbers, the chapter name sometimes. In the headers, there's sometimes the page numbers or the chapter titles or something like that. And is that important? Why? Why does it help you? I would think it would help you find your place. If you need to refer to a page, you know exactly how to get there really quickly. You don't have to count pages out. You can go to page 58 from page 1 without counting 58 pages. So footers are just navigational aids that help you get from one place to another. They're kind of like little road signs that help you find your way through the book. Okay? So this is the survey portion of the book. When I tell students you have finished surveying your book and you have an idea of how to approach it, all the chapters are organized the same way so that your brain can relax again and know that my chapter will either not have something at the beginning to think about, like focus questions or outcomes for the chapter. It may or may not have review things at the end, a summary at the end, but all of the chapters are organized the same way, and that allows their brains to just, I can handle this, and look at the chapter like that. Now when they start reading, I tell them, where are you going to start reading? Where are you going to start reading, Laverne?
From the beginning.
From the beginning, where are you going to start reading, Annie?
I'm not just kidding, I'm beginning.
In the beginning, where are you going to start, Olga? In the beginning? Where are you going to start, Mike?
Sometimes I'll start at the end and read the summary.
Okay, good for you. What are you going to do, Jerry?
I do that sometimes too, depending on what kind of material it is.
This is something I learned in grad school. The 2 week, I think the semester before my last semester, my instructor told me about this, and I thought, why didn't somebody tell me about this before? If you have chapter summaries, start reading the chapter summary before you go to the front. If you have chapter review questions, read those review questions even though you can't answer them, because you are giving your brain information that it needs to look for. And when our brains are given questions to look for, it is going to look for those answers, whether we want it to or not. So you are, again, priming your brain to look for information that we may not know we have, and we're going to find out when we read. But if we just start at the first page and dive right in, when we start reading, we don't know what we're looking for. So reading the chapter summary first, and the chapter review questions, if you have them, is better. If you don't have them, but you have focus questions, read the focus questions first, and then know that at the end, you have to be able to answer those questions. If you cannot, go back to that area. Like this political science book has all of these little focus questions that at the end, the students, at the end of that chapter, the students should be able to answer all of those. If that student cannot, then he or she needs to go back and look at the items that she can't find. Okay? So that's how you do features analysis. And then you have the read and the reading part. The rest of SQ3R is on the back. But I encourage all of you, when you're working with students and asking them about their textbook, ask them how do they read and what do they do first. What do you do first? And ask them too what their reading strategy is. You know, do you just, if you don't understand this first paragraph, what do you do? Oh, usually it's like, oh, well, I reread it, you know. Well, yeah, but that's not really good. So, you know, let this be a guide for you. And if you can help spread the word, we are more than happy to have students come to us to learn how to read their textbook. But in your classrooms, it is an easy 15-minute go over at the beginning of the semester, and it might help them work through their books a little bit better. Maybe be less resistant to doing assigned readings before they come to class. Okay?
Well, I hope that you're feeling a little bit excited about, you know, all of the things that really are in those textbooks, and the importance of, for the student, of being able to recognize the things that are there and how they can help them. Now, the thing to think about is that, again, these are things, these are items that are in the textbook that you look at and you automatically utilize those things. You know, you've had lots of experience utilizing those things. And you may have gotten some things, some awarenesses that you didn't have before, but most of them are things that you probably do, but they don't. So it's really important that they get that awareness and be able to see what they need to do too. And there's, again, two prongs of attack, I guess. One is to have somebody come and do a lecture for you, but it doesn't. You don't have to have a full class dedicated just to that. You can do it in yourself, as Maggie said, in 15 minutes. I give them this to take home for homework and do. I talk about it a little bit. They do it for homework. Then maybe we talk about it a little bit more, or I bring out parts of that as we go through. If I want them to look at something in a particular chapter, has some great charts, you know, I'll say, oh, and I hold the book, I turn the book, my book, which is highlighted and annotated, I turn it this way. And I say, look at that, you know, hey, you guys have to study for this quiz. Well, look here, what's in here. And point out those things. Again, talk about how you do it when you study. And that's going to help them as well. I want to leave you with a couple of things too. One is learning styles. Now, chances are that when you all ticked off the things that you do, the things that you didn't tick off were probably things that don't fit in with your learning style. That's why you don't utilize those strategies when you're reading, and they're not as effective for you. Our students, many of them, learn best in a kinesthetic way, a visual way, rather than a read and write kind of way or an auditory way. Yet do they get most of their information? Through reading, writing, and auditory, listening to things. So we need to, even if it's not our strong point, the kinesthetic type of strategies, we can still talk about the process that's being used. We know what that is and how to do that. So look at the strategies on that sheet that you have. And did I write down? Yes, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There are 8 different ones that really speak to the kinesthetic, the visual styles of learning. 3, 6, 7. If you just want to mark them. 9, 11, 14, 15, 16. Those are all strategies that might be ones that would work well for your students. So yes, 3, 6, 7, 9, 11, 14, 15, and 16. Look for opportunities. One thing that you can do is develop an awareness of when you can model for them. And you can point out learning, talk about learning styles a little bit. If you don't do that in your class anyway, help them see what, the different way they learn, how they can use things one thing more effectively than another. It doesn't take a lot of class time to do that. But remembering to do that can make a big difference for our students. Asking your students to share what works for them, particularly if you've already mentioned a few times over the semester, talked a little bit about learning style or modeled some thinking processes, you could say, okay, can somebody share something that works for them? And it's when they hear it from another student, that makes a difference too. So try something like that. I have a couple of, a handout for you. Can you pass those out, Maggie, please? You can, and give one to me when you go around. So I have it there. Okay, thanks.
You don't get one.
Anyway, I'm giving you a few handouts with just some ideas, again, of things that you can do in a classroom that don't add to your teaching burden. But in terms of homework time or taking away from other work that you're doing. The first one that's here is analyzing your reading assignment. This is something that you can have them do in a group after you've assigned a reading, if it works, if that works for you. And basically what it does is it models what a study group, an effective study group would do. And I have my students do that, and then at the end I say, you know what, this is what a good study group would do. So I have them, when I'm reviewing for a final, this is how I review for the final. I have them get into groups, and I will have different groups do a different chapter, and then share that with everybody else after they've gone through this process. Then I'm not the one up there talking, but they have learned a good way to do it, to analyze their reading assignment. These other activities that you see here are all things that you can give your students to use when you give them a reading assignment. You can, there's a couple of frameworks here. One is called a shaping up framework. The other one is called a bullseye. It has a bullseye on it. And you can adapt these to your course or the chapter that you have them reading. What it does is it helps focus them in on using those higher level critical thinking skills while they're reading that chapter that you are asking them to read. You can collect these so that they know they have to do it, but you don't have to grade these. It's good information for you just to get a sense of what they don't understand, what's clear, what's not clear for them, because our students also are not usually people who are going to, if we ask them, they're not going to tell us. They don't respond, but they've responded here, so you can get an idea. The other one that, the other thing you can use these for are roll prompts, if you call roll. It takes a little bit more time to ask them. If you look at the, I think it's the last page, or second to last page, it's a spunky. It's an acronym, and I asked them to find what's surprising. What did you learn that was surprising? What was perplexing? What was something new? What was something you already knew? And when I call roll, I'll just say, okay, tell me what was, okay, surprising, perplexing. And if they didn't read, I say, okay, fine, no problem. Next guy, what was perplexing for you? You know, it doesn't take that much time, but it, again, they know they have to do it, you collect it, you don't have to grade it, but it helps. And the other is another that's kind of a fun thing. It's an admission card to get into class, so to speak. But what it does is you adapt this for, again, the subject, the chapter that you have them read. It helps them think critically about what they read and then apply it to real life for themselves, the second part of the question. Now, I just picked a couple of chapters in books, in other subject books, and made 3 or 4 different ones to give you the idea. So, again, take time, know how you think, give that gift to your students, utilize the ideas that Maggie has given you to help them understand their textbook in the very beginning of the semester, and then refer to that often throughout the semester. Doesn't take much time. Do you have any questions or anything you want to say with regard to that for us while we're here?
Speak now or
Speak
forever
now.
hold your peace.
Yeah. Again, we can get you electronic copies of these things if you want them. Just let us know, and we'll be glad to do that. And give us a call if you have a question or anything like that. And thank you very much for coming.
Thank you. Is this an easy textbook?
It's not real hard.
This is interesting because I put this textbook in, this history textbook, for a reason, because it has nothing for our students to hang their hats on. Nothing, okay? It is all black and white.
Yep.
There are no sidebars. There's nothing in bold type. There are no terms to know. There's no review, no summary, no anything.
Wow.
And I want you to remember this.
When you choose
Specifically, when you teach, I'm working hard to try to impact the readability levels of some of our textbooks.
Right.
This one is still used in history. It tests at a readability level of second-year master's program. This is a research book for researchers. And we have to remember that there is nobody on this campus in this class that is above sophomore level. And the kids come to me just crying because they have to remember stuff out of here, and there's nothing that tells them what's important. Not a thing. So keep that in mind.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you know what, Maggie, then on the other hand, I'm looking through the psychology textbook, and I am so distracted with all the different types of study tips, all the different colors. I mean, it's almost overkill.
Right, and that would be learning style. That applies to learning style because frankly, give me that book. Give me that book because I like all those little chunked pieces. I love the diagrams and the color, and that is exactly why somebody's learning style can impact what they get out of a textbook. You know,
And
if
that's
they are
another reason
confused by
why
that,
knowing that you can, maybe not here, but in when you get to university, instructors do have different textbooks, and if they know their learning style, they can look at the textbook and they can say, is this going to work for me or not? And that can make a
Yeah.
big difference in
Yeah.
whether they pass or fail the course. They may not know the instructors, you know, but
But do authors usually, when they write a textbook, do they usually keep in mind the different learning styles?
Some of them do. The new ones, the new publications do. Yes, they do. As a matter of fact, one of the anatomy book that they're using now is so good that they have, there are auditory pieces to it. You just go to their lab and you can have all of this stuff read to you if that's your learning style. They have all different kinds of activities to meet every kind of learning style. It's really amazing. But we don't have a lot of textbooks like that. Okay, we are still working with older style textbooks. Still this different version, you know, it's been updated a couple times, but it looks exactly the same inside.
Yeah.
Exactly
and that's
the same
our
inside.
our college
Yeah.
success book caters to different learning styles. But and I point that out to my students. I say, look, you know what? There's a chart here. If you understand things by looking at something graphic, it talks about different styles of procrastination. It's written here in a paragraph right here, but there's a chart right here. So look at both of them and see which way helps you understand it better. You know, talking to them about things like this is helpful, and it doesn't take a lot of time.
Sure. You have, look Annie, you have your history book that you looked at. This is a history book as well.
I know, I was telling her,
I love it.
I know, hers
This is
had
a
all
really
the,
good one. This is
yeah,
a
hers had all the information on the side.
There's, you are the student and this is MH